Hi, folks. It's Dr. Pat Sherlock again, School of Business, NSCC, talking to the economics class. I wanted to talk a little bit today about trade and Canada's trade agreements, and I want to talk a little bit about implications of trade. You're working on a project with a company that you may be able to find linkages to with trade. So I'm going to talk just generally off the sort of the top of my head, in a sense, about trade in no more than, say, 5 to 7 minutes. I'll try to keep this fairly brief. I think that the big focus right now in trade in Canada would be around the Trans Pacific trade deal, which is the new North American Free Trade Agreement. There are now, I believe it's 13 countries involved, and it used to be Canada, Mexico, and the United States. That trade deal will have an enormous impact on Canada. We have to remember that our largest trading partner is the United States. They buy 75% of everything we export in Canada, which is a pretty significant event. And if you consider that with our declining dollar, our dollar now below 70 cents, it means that our products are of huge value to an American company, and it makes it, they get greater value. It's like we put everything on sale by 35% right now. So that's a good thing in terms of the billions of dollars of trade we'll do with the US. It's the trade with the other 12 countries or so that's perplexing. Some of those countries are developing nations, low wages. It's possible we could be exporting jobs to low wage countries. That doesn't really appear to be the case. My bias is I'm very pro trade. I tend to see trade as opportunities for companies to gain comparative advantage, sell products that other countries don't have, and buy other products at cheaper prices. I think in the end, globalization and trade is the answer. It's a question of how the deals are worked out. The Canadian dollar is a huge advantage to us right now. It's a disadvantage when we're buying American products or other products. But the dollar is something to keep in mind. Another thing to focus in on with trade is one of the things that has not been mentioned in the news is the ability for people to travel, Canadians to travel to other countries to do business. I travel extensively. I have a visa so that I can work in the United States, but I also work in Europe, and even though probably 90% of my work is in the U.S., and that's because I work for a number of American companies. However, it was often more difficult to get visas, and under the new Trans Pacific trade deal, it's been contended that it will be much easier for Canadians to work abroad and much easier for people in those countries to work abroad. The big issue with the Trans Pacific trade deal is around dairy, fisheries, the effect that those trade deals will have. Nova Scotia is in an interesting position in a sense that we do export a lot of product uh, in the tune of about $4 billion, even though this trade deal is probably about 100 to 125 billion for all of Canada. And there's the buy local argument where we'll argue that we shouldn't be allowing these countries to export cheaper products into our market because it will hurt our market. We will see lower prices as consumers. There's no question about that. And some of our industries will be hurt. If they become competitive enough, the argument is that they then get access to an American market of 300 million people, a European market. Now, it's not totally European, um, primarily countries in the Pacific Rim, but they'll get access to so many millions more consumers that they could potentially become much global themselves. There's fear involved in trade. Companies fear that they'll be overwhelmed by the cheaper markets. They fear that some of the low wage producing countries, such as Vietnam, will overwhelm them because they can hire labor at much cheaper rates. It's a very difficult challenge. So it's something to keep in mind when in your projects you're looking at your particular company. Ask yourself, could this company conceivably do international trade? Even if it's a small company, what I'd like you to do with the economic projects is imagine that they do buy products from another country and ask yourself, how expensive would it be with a lower dollar? And then ask yourself, what if the company managed to go global? What if they managed to sell their products internationally? How could they expand? It's something that unfortunately, as Nova Scotians, we tend not to think enough about the world market and trade. And we tend to, I think, too often focus on the local market and not see the huge opportunity that exists if we can see ourselves expanding and growing our market. NSCC is an example of a college that is international. We are involved with organizations around the world, and we see ourselves more global and international. There are a number of Nova Scotia companies that have grown from small companies to global suppliers because they dared to take the risk and take advantage of the opportunity to sell into huge markets. Canada is simply so small at 30 to 35 million, and Nova Scotia at a million in population and continuing to decline, probably closer to 900,000 now, and without new immigration, we represent such a small market. So please, when you think about trade, think about the opportunities, and I'd like you to opportunities, particularly for your companies that you've chosen to analyze in the projects. I hope you'll focus in that regard. I'd also like to say that I know that when I took over the course, I discovered that the textbook had been changed. And the end result is that the textbook often does not match the specific content that you're looking at. But all of the topics are in the new textbook, even though they may not specifically match the online content. So don't be concerned about that. If you do look through the textbook, you'll find some interesting concepts on trade. Thank you very much for your time. We'll be talking to you soon. Cheers, everyone.